Welcome to Authentically Inauthentic podcast. And today I have a very interesting guest. You'll get to learn a little bit about him. Clovis, I've known you for some time, and
Yeah,
it's really
quite
been
some
a
time.
great pleasure and honor to call you a friend and a colleague.
Likewise, Godfrey.
And Clovis, I imagine you've traveled far and wide, not just in Africa, but also outside of Africa, in the Americas, in Europe. And Clovis, one thing that does intrigue me a little bit, and I get to ask myself these kind of questions: when will Africa, our beloved continent, ever get to the level of other continents? The fact of the matter is, yes, Africa is a young continent, extremely endowed with natural resources, minerals, and all that. But it defeats me every time I think of where we are vis-a-vis where we ought to be as a continent, given the level of resources that we have. I get disappointed. Do I have false hopes, or is it something that you also share?
Well, I think thank you very much, Godfrey, for having me in the show. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be having this conversation with you, and also to be calling you friends. We've known each other for quite some long time, not only on the professional side of things, but also on the personal aspects. And you've been doing unknowingly and for free one of my silent mentors. So people that I look up to as an aspiring leader. You are one of those people that I take as concrete example of what I want to become in the future, not only as a person, but as a professional. Now, coming back to your question, I think I'm I'm a very optimistic person. I'm actually an Afro-optimist person. I have hope for Africa as a continent, not only because I belong to this place, but also because of the resources that I see, the potential that I've been able to witness throughout the continent, from the north to the south, from the east to the west. Unfortunately, we seem to not have been able to find the right recipe to blend all of these things together to be able to spark an actual development that we can compare to that of other countries that we call developed today. There are reasons that can explain it. We can try some attempt of explanation that can be historical, but I think it doesn't say the whole truth. History has some role to play into why Africa is not developed today, but the real reason, and to be, if we want to be honest with ourselves, is that we African have not been able to, to be serious with ourselves. And I think there are hope, given some good examples that we have within the continent that we can learn from, and then apply some of those
Examples,
examples
yeah.
within the places that are seen as the least developed, so that as a continent we grow all together and we don't have so heavy disparities between the different regions.
Excellent. I like I like when we are drawing examples, we try to draw examples within first. In Africa, you know, you have been, I've been in Morocco. We've traveled to the north, to the northern Africa, and the level of they're far ahead. The level of development in the north of Africa, it's actually surprising. You've gone to Southern Africa, Johannesburg, you've been to Cape Town, you've been to those sides of Africa, whereby we share similarities. Yes, Southern Africa was colonized, with a lot of migration from Europeans, from Netherlands. the boys, who most of them are still there today. But you can see the imprints of a good development agenda. You can actually see and feel it. At the same time, most parts of Africa were colonized with the same group of people from Europe. But in the sub-Saharan Africa, especially our countries, if you look at the belt of our countries, I come from Kenya, you come from Burkina Faso, we can draw the parallels, across the equator at that level. And why really haven't our leaders? Is it a leadership issue? There's something quite that we as an African continent haven't been able to put a finger to. And just like you said, a huge element of it is lack of seriousness. And then my question is, you know, how do we then get serious? When do we get to see the fruits of all these natural resources that we are endowed with, Clovis? What are some of the ideas what are some of the things that you think as Africans we need to start doing? And what do we need to stop doing?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I believe depending on where we sit and from where we are looking, the answer might be different. And you will be surprised to hear that being from Burkina, Eastern Africa has been one of the places we've been looking up to as places that are developed.
Correct.
And I've recently seen Kenyan praising my own country, Burkina, as being on the right path.
Correct.
The bottom line is we always look up others. And I think this is one of the reasons that leads to immigration. Because as African, we tend to see European countries, for instance, as the El Dorado. That's the reason many youth make it the ultimate goal to be in Europe, for instance, even risking their own life on the boats. And it all comes back to leadership and leadership as a broad concept. If I want to break it down, I'm seeing governance as one of the serious points. Some of those countries that you've mentioned, Northern Africa, but I can also mention some of the countries in the Indian Ocean islands, Mauritius, Seychelles. I think one of the main reasons of their development, either in the Human Development Index, GDP per capita, it comes down to governance.
I agree.
Governance is what leads you to make the right choice of investment for your country. And you can see that those countries have invested a lot in education. Education, healthcare. Mauritius is the first African countries in the Human Development Index.
Wow.
Right? They don't seem to have, heavy minerals or natural resources, but they invested in the human.
Correct.
And the human is the most valuable resource.
The human capital.
The human capital.
Absolutely.
That any country can have. And unfortunately, we're letting in our countries these resources go away.
We are giving up.
We're giving up
exactly.
on that resources.
No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that better than you have. Listen, we are both in Senegal, and the ultimate dream of a young Senegalese boy is to leave their country and go, whichever means they have, they want to ultimately find themselves in Europe.
Yeah.
And it's not just a Senegalese symptom. It's an African problem. Yeah. The only difference is it's contextually, a bit different from country to country. Especially, for example, in my country, Kenya, we have so many young Kenyans, well-educated at the university level, who either go to Australia in search of further studies and they start their own lives there. Not just Australia. Kenyans are all over in Europe. What is that? In the US. That's a serious brain drain, right? Whereas this is the column of expertise, the capital resources that we need to build our countries.
Yeah.
But we are bleeding as a continent. We are sending all our energetic people out there to develop and build other continents. And I agree with you that migration will not stop. Migration will continue because these people will continue to want to seek better lives. Social media has aggravated the issue. Every day, right at the palm of their hands, they are seeing how their colleagues who've crossed the Panaries, who've crossed the Pacific, who crossed the Atlantic, they're seeing them enjoying life. And that's what social media sells.
Yeah.
And them more than ever before, they are motivated to cross over to how do we stop this?
Yeah, I think we also need to tell the truth on both aspects. I deeply believe that the very things in terms of infrastructure opportunities that Africans that are fleeing the continent are seeing in Western countries, they also exist in African countries. When I look at immigration, I don't consider me leaving Burkina to come to Senegal as an immigrant and as an immigration. I think leaving one African country to another African country is a good move to do. And as a continent, we need to establish the right policies that allow for freedom of movement, population, free trade. It's been one of the major points that has been discussed in the CEO forum that has happened not so long ago in Abidjan. On paper, some of those policies are written, but in reality, it's still a challenge.
Exactly.
So African will prefer to try to go to Europe, despite all the risk to the life, rather than trying to go to another African country. So I was mentioning telling the truth. It's first of all to show that on the continent there are opportunities that they can seize. I'm happy to see people from the diaspora not only investing back to Africa, but also coming themselves to build the continent, to build their country of origin. But we need to also take upon ourselves to say to the youth that it's not the grass is not always green
on the other side.
On the other side, we've seen how some black people have been mistreated in Europe
out there.
And if you had to tell the full truth, the whole reality, many of the young people will prefer if also given the opportunity in terms of investment, in terms of framework to flourish and foster within the continent, they will prefer to stay. The second thing, when we talk about Africa and Africa resources, we tend to put the emphasis on the youth, but unfortunately on the quantity side,
I agree.
We also need to build the quality of that youth.
I agree.
And it goes back to education, basic education, professional education, practical skills. We need to build the infrastructures that allow for the youth to get trained, to have the basic knowledge to undertake in whatever area of work they want to invest themselves into. So that aspect of education is, for me, the foundational part of any growth trajectory when it comes to development for a country.
I agree.
And then other aspects in terms of investing in healthcare, creating the right political framework,
environment,
exactly, for investment and growth for the youth.
Absolutely, spot on. You've mentioned two things that have caught my attention. First is those arbitrary borders. It's a shame to date. We've kept those colonial borders. I was traveling the other day from Ghana, and we happened to stop in Abidjan. And of course, as a Kenyan, I need a visa to go to Abidjan, to go to Ivory Coast. And I was just seeing another African, a Cameroonian, also going through the same challenges, and I was asking
Yeah.
myself, listen, you know, in Europe, borders are just borders are there for administrative purposes, right? Borders are there to show this is the end of Latvia and this is the beginning of this country, and this is, borders are not there to stop people from moving across, stop goods from moving across. Actually, borders, have, in contrary to what we see here in Africa, borders have enabled economic growth. I'm just, I am just lost for when African leaders and Africa as a continent will realize, that for us really to be able to grow, we have to facilitate free movement of people and goods, free trade, just like you mentioned earlier, and make it count, make it intentional, right? Of course, there are the Achilles heels of corruption and all those things that bedevil
Yeah.
that aggravate the challenge. Of course, weaker administrative systems. Even the personnel working in these systems take advantages and all those things. I just wanted to put this one out there, like our authorities really need to wake up from this slumber and say enough of these arbitrary borders. We have our countries. We know the demarcations of our countries. We know where South Sudan begins and ends. We know where Uganda begins and ends. We know where Burkina Faso and Mali meet and end, right? But these are just borders. And we need to let our people trade. We need to let our people prosper. Because these things are giving us, challenges, a huge challenge in doing business. The cost of doing business in the hinterland countries, it's extremely expensive, right? If I am a water engineer, and off the top of my head, I know in Senegal, if I am to drill a well, equip it with a pump, and probably have a chateau, kind of a water storage tank, with 55,000 US dollars, I have a proper mechanized system that can serve more than 2,500 to 3,000 people. To do the same system in Chad, I need 130,000 US dollars.
Huge disparities.
Huge disparities. And again, the cost of doing business in those countries has been heightened by the fact that we are making, everything difficult. These borders and the insecurity, getting things from the ports, from this other side to the hinterland, and it's just those are some of the things that hold us back as a continent. We're not going to be able to develop with this kind of policies in place.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're spot on. And it's not only on the material things, even in terms of finance. The cost I have to pay to send money back to Burkina, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Unacceptable.
Imagine me being in Senegal, willing to invest back home and being taxed maybe 10% of the cost of the investment.
It's prohibitive.
It's prohibitive. It's discouraging.
Exactly.
So at the same time, we want people to be able to move freely and goods to move freely. We need to also make sure the capital move also freely.
Correct.
The issue, as you rightly put it, is that we are seeing ourselves as single countries and not as, we're not evolving in a symbiotic type of
Relationships.
The way the world is and the way the continent is, God has created this way, and not everything can be found in one single place.
Correct.
So the North needs the South. On the climate point of view, some things grow in the eastern part and not in the southern part. All these, I believe, was established for us to be able to communicate and collaborate together for the good of all the continents. But keep thinking as individual countries will prevent us to to have this collaboration type
Correct.
of relationship that will allow for the growth of the entire continent. And it's still built massively even 60 years after the independence
Independence.
on, you know, the colonial borders.
Yeah.
Why can't we decide today to break those
Dismantle
borders?
them completely.
Dismantle them.
Obliterate them completely.
A continent with so much currencies, see, exchange rates, and even the currencies with the same names don't have the same value across the countries.
Exactly.
With my CFA from West Africa, I cannot do anything in Central Africa while them using still the same CFA.
The same currency.
Yeah, you have Ghana and Nigeria nested between, CFA using countries, and it makes everything complicated.
Exactly.
Nigeria, for instance, as leading the West Africa economy, cannot be part of the stock market because of the currency they are using. We have that fragmented ways of doing many
Business.
things
Yeah,
and
yeah,
business. Language is no longer so much a border.
Yeah.
I'm Francophone by origin.
Yeah.
I managed to find my way using English.
And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that one time,
Yeah.
And probably next time we're taking an interview again,
Yes.
we will do it in French.
In French, absolutely.
You just never.
And technology
Yeah.
allows for free communication. Communication language is no longer a barrier.
Barrier, yeah.
So we need to look into those very things that create this complication for us to make business.
The enablers.
The enablers. Yeah. And strangely, some of our forefathers had started setting, the tone,
Foundation.
the foundation.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the dynamic has been broken at some point.
Yeah.
I can't seem to understand why. But people like Kwame Nkrumah, Thomas Sankara, they've tried to bring us together. This may be what led to creating some of those economic community, ECOWAS, that is now getting fragmented.
The SADC
that's another story.
The SADC in Southern
the SADC
Africa.
in Southern Africa. But we need to take it one step
at a time.
At a time, and one
ahead.
step ahead.
Yeah.
Having one continent.
One Africa.
One Africa.
What's difficult?
It's actually one Africa.
One
Africa. It's a one block of land. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I mean, Clovis, listen, we work in the same industry, and in our kind of industry, we feed off of best practice.
Yeah.
And then when I'm talking about best practice, I'm taking you back to one of the statements you made about Ghana, encouraging investors from outside to come into the country. They don't only invest in Ghana, but they had this initiative some years back where they pitched it to the American community.
Yeah.
More so the blacks, the African Americans in the US, and told them, listen, come back home. I think there's been a campaign where the Ghanaian government invited, the Americans. And I see every time I travel to Accra, it's either on the plane, they are always Americans, and the Americans of color, the Black Americans traveling back to Accra. And it's because most of them have started businesses there. Most of them have invested in real estate there. So they're coming back home, and they identify themselves with being back home. So, I mean, I was just imagining myself. There are many initiatives that other countries are doing well. Talk of Rwanda. There are many positives from Rwanda's development over the last 15 or so years, 20 years. We can see and feel the positive traction on Rwanda's development. Yeah. We've spoken about Mauritius. It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
You understand? Yes. So there are countries that are doing quite well in Africa. Today, the euphoria tends to be with Burkina Faso, you know.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it earlier as well, that you're surprised that even my compatriots in Kenya are
Yeah.
always lauding what's happening in Burkina. Of course, you and I
Yeah.
travel to Ouagadougou. I
Yeah.
see what what Captain Traore
Yeah.
and the authorities of the day are trying to do.
Yeah.
They're trying to play a serious catch up.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yes.
So, what are some of the things, in your own opinion, that you think other countries, other African countries are doing well, that the other African countries need to begin, picking and probably contextualizing them into their own environment and political architecture and building it in the interest of their own people?
Yeah. Um, I can easily mention a list of 20 things, and it's going in every direction in my head. But I've talked about governance. That's one of the points that I believe developed countries within Africa have been able to achieve by establishing, strong institutions.
Yeah.
So beyond the leader, as individuals, they've made sure no matter who is in charge, that the countries keep on evolving on the right path. The second point is they've opened up to anyone who wants our good. They need to come, but with a clear agenda.
Correct.
That they are contributing to the development of the country.
I agree.
And it can be as simple as not imposing visa to anyone from Africa.
Correct.
You mentioned Rwanda. It's the case. I can easily
go to Rwanda
without visa. Benin, as follow the path, it's an open country, and you can see that Benin from the last years has been, developing in different aspects.
Correct.
There is still a lot to do, but we can honestly say it's on a good track.
Correct.
The third point that I can mention is self-determination. Not allowing anyone to dictate what is good for us. The political decision we make, if it's for the good for our people, let's make the decision for ourselves.
Correct.
You mentioned us being in the same sector, and I do resource mobilization.
Right.
And most of the time, when we are writing proposal, and you go to most of the developed institutions, global or regional institutions, even organizations that have as mandate developed countries, the way they describe our countries is a bit frustrating. You will read Niger is one of the least developed countries in the world.
Yeah.
Burkina is one of the poorest countries in the world. X country is one of the most insecure country in the world. And we've been taught these things from school, from primary school.
It's not like we are not aware.
Yeah.
It goes without saying, don't tell us.
Don't tell us.
Please
we
continue.
know it.
Yeah.
We know it.
Yeah.
But that's only one side of the coin. You can say it. Niger is one of also the wealthiest countries in the world, depending on
the context.
On the context
of your message.
What are you looking into?
Correct.
You can say the same for Burkina.
Yeah.
And not only in terms of natural resources,
Yeah.
because this is what most of the developing institutions use to rank the countries.
Measure, yeah.
But there are other aspects.
Correct.
Correct.
The level of happiness,
of the people,
the culture, integrity of the culture, and all those things, Wow.
Yeah, these are some of the points that I believe: governance, openness of the country to development, and self-determination. Let's start telling our own story.
Self-determination
from the very basic age. Let's teach the young people what is it to be an African. Where we are coming from. We've known great leaders of the past that have shaped the development of the world. Some of the critical, for instance, we keep talking about human rights.
Right.
We forget that many of the principle in these core documents is coming from uh, rules and principle that was used back in the year.
Correct.
We talk about Mansa Musa, one of the wealthiest people
I-
that
I-
have ever lived,
yeah.
is the one who established the foundation of what is called human right
Wow.
today.
Wow.
You know,
Thank you.
so
Thank you.
we need to go back to
Thank
those
you.
to those basic
And
things.
just to finish, Clovis, you've said something that I want to use as a remark. The story of Africa is better told by us, the Africans ourselves. So what we're trying to tell Africans who are going to be watching us is, listen, let's tell our stories more. We can't wait for the Western media to tell good stories of Africa.
Yeah.
They will tell the stories that fit, the interest of their audience. Is that the interest of Africans? No. We we finalized this podcast, by encouraging, our media practitioners, young and youthful African professionals out there. You don't have to be in communications. Use whatever career you are in. You use whatever job you are in, your talents, whatever you have, to tell the African story from a lens, an eye of an African. Thank you. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Clovis.
Thank you for having me.
It's a beautiful. It's always beautiful having you.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you.